Hey guys, it's Jen. Welcome back to my channel and welcome back to another day of Vlogust. This month I am posting a video every day, and today's video is a what's for dinner video. So I'm going to be making some pasta carbonara, some simple cheeseburgers, a chicken kale pasta recipe, as well as a healthier peanut butter freezer pie. These are the three recipes and dessert that I'm going to share with you today. So we're going to start out with the linguine carbonara, and I'm going to start out by putting some bacon on a sheet tray here that I just have covered with foil, and I'm just going to cook this in the oven. If you guys have never tried cooking bacon in your oven before, it is super duper easy. You can just put it on a sheet tray, and I usually cook it at about 400 degrees for 20 minutes or until it's as crispy as you like it. We're also going to need some roasted garlic for this recipe, and so I just cut the top off of that whole head of garlic, put it into a piece of foil, wrapped it up with some salt and olive oil, and I'm going to roast that in the oven along with the bacon. Alongside of this pasta dish, I'm going to also make some garlic bread. I had these ciabatta rolls in the freezer that I wanted to use up, and so I just have them and then cut them into triangles. I melted a little bit of butter in the microwave, and into that butter I put in some parsley flakes, some salt and pepper, and some garlic powder, and then I'm just brushing that butter over the bread. While the bacon was cooking, I went ahead and cooked my linguine. So I'm just cooking that in a really large pot of salted boiling water. And then next we will work on the sauce for the linguine carbonara. So this recipe was actually an every plate recipe, and I get every plate usually about twice a month. This is not sponsored or anything. I use my own money to buy boxes from them every once in a while. So I do have a $20 off coupon code if you guys ever want to try it out. It's for new customers only. So I'll leave that link down below. Otherwise, I'll also leave this recipe linked down below. If you want to buy the ingredients from the store, you can do that as well. So my bacon is done. I'm just going to go ahead and chop this up into small pieces. Alternatively, I guess you could, chop up the bacon raw and then fry it in a skillet, but I already had many things going on top of my stove, so it was just as easy to cook it in the oven. So here's what that garlic looks like after it is done roasting. It should be soft enough that you can just squeeze it and the cloves will come right out of it. And then what I'll do is just take a fork and mash this up, and this is going to go in the sauce for the carbonara. I don't know that this recipe is super traditional, I guess I would say, because it does have a little bit of cream cheese in it, but it does also have egg yolks in it, which I added as well. So here are my frozen peas, and I'm just sauteing those in a little bit of butter with that mashed garlic. Don't skip that step because it really did give this pasta a lot of flavor. Then I added some chicken broth in there with the peas along with some cream cheese, and just basically heated that up and stirred it together until I got a creamy sauce. So here is the linguine that I drained, and I put a pat of butter in there along with a couple egg yolks. Make sure as soon as you put the egg yolks in that you stir that up really well. Otherwise you might end up with scrambled eggs in your pasta, and no one wants that. But the heat of the peas and the cream cheese sauce will cook the eggs, so you don't need to worry that you're having like raw egg in your dish or anything like that. But the egg yolk does give it kind of a richer taste, and it helps the sauce thicken up a little bit, so it's definitely really good. Everyone really loved this. How is it, what's not to like, honestly, about pasta with peas and bacon? And then here was the garlic toast on the side. So that is what we had for dinner on this night. There were no complaints from anyone. Okay, so next up, I just have a quick idea for cheeseburgers. We've been liking to have these more since the weather has been nicer, although tonight I did actually cook these on my indoor griddle. But on the side, we're going to have some watermelon. So I just bought this quarter watermelon at the grocery store. Sometimes I find if I buy whole watermelons that we waste them, and I don't really want to do that, so I've been trying to buy smaller portions. So I just like to cut these up into wedges, and then I cut off the rind and then just dice them up into small pieces and put them on a platter so that everyone can pick off of that and have it on the side with their dinner. Sometimes I also get questions about where my chef's knife is from. It is from Misen, so I will link that down below as well. So for my burgers, I just season these really simply with a little bit of A1 steak sauce, some salt, pepper, and garlic powder. That's usually how I season my burgers, is pretty simply. I usually don't put a whole lot of seasoning in them just because I don't want it to detract from the flavor. And this griddle pan actually came with our stove, so I don't have a link for it. And it's one of those things that I didn't really know I needed until I had one, but it does come in handy for stuff like this. So once I flip the burgers over, I put some American cheese on the top and just let that melt. And then on the side, I just heated up a can of baked beans. This was a day when I got home from work and I was not feeling cooking anything complicated. And so this is what we had. So here is my burger. I did toast the buns. I cut up some lettuce and tomato, and we had some pickles and some beans and some chips on the side. And that was our dinner on that night. Okay, so next up, I'm sharing a Pioneer Woman recipe, and this is chicken kale pasta. I used this recipe out of one of my Pioneer Woman cookbooks, but this recipe is online as well. So I'll link the recipe down below as well as this cookbook. It's the Pioneer Woman Dinner Time cookbook. All of her cookbooks are really fabulous. They have lots of pictures and they're easy to follow, so I would recommend any of them. I have 2 chicken breasts here that I'm going to just cube up into small chunks, and we're going to saute those, and that will be the meat that goes into this pasta dish. The nice thing about a dish like this is that you really only need a couple chicken breasts to feed a family of 4. So definitely, if you're trying to watch your budget now that meat prices seem to be going back up, this is definitely a good way to do that and stretch your protein a little bit further at dinner time. I also am going to need some minced garlic, and so I'm using my garlic press. I'm just smashing my garlic and then putting it through the garlic press. I could have just minced this up, but I wanted it to be a little bit finer throughout the sauce that goes on this pasta, so I just went ahead and took the time to mince that with my garlic press. Okay, I'm also going to need some kale for this pasta, and this was just kale that I had already washed up and stored in the refrigerator from the weekend before. You want to chop this as small as you can. This will cook down, but it's easier to eat along with the pasta if it's in smaller pieces. And I was actually a little bit surprised that my kids ate the kale in with the pasta without complaint. They do like greens and salad and things like that, but sometimes when I mix it in with dishes, they're not big fans of it, but they actually really like this pasta. So if you have kids, definitely try this out. So here's my chicken. I'm just sauteing that in my skillet with salt, pepper, and a little bit of olive oil. And then you'll also need some cherry tomatoes for this recipe. You do want to take the time to cut these in half. Part of the sauce mixture that's going to be on this pasta is going to be made with the cherry tomatoes. And so obviously if you cut the cherry tomatoes in half, their juices will obviously release, and then it will contribute to the sauce. So I'm just cutting those in half, and then next I'm going to remove my cooked chicken from the skillet and then start making the sauce. So I'm putting my minced garlic in the pan. There's still a little bit of oil in there left over from the chicken, and then I'm going to just cook that around. Make sure that you don't cook this garlic too long or you will burn it. Just make sure you watch it really closely, and then once it's cooked through, you can add a little bit of white wine. I had white wine on hand, and so that's what I use. You could use either like a Pinot Grigio, a Sauvignon Blanc, or a Chardonnay, something dry like that. But if you don't have any wine on hand, don't go out and buy it. If it's not something you normally keep, just use extra chicken broth, and then I put in some chicken broth. So while the sauce is cooking, I'm going to go ahead and cook my penne. So I just have about 3/4 pound of penne that I'm cooking in some boiling salted water. Okay, so once the chicken broth and the wine cooks down with the garlic, I went ahead and put the kale in, and then I'm just going to stir that around until it all wilts up. And don't look at my stove during these clips because obviously it's very greasy from all that chicken that I just cooked and splattered everywhere. So after the kale was cooked down, we put in the tomatoes and the chicken and then just let that simmer. You also do add a little bit of Parmesan cheese, and then you can add salt and pepper if it needs it. So I like to call this poor man's garlic bread, or whatever you want to call it, but basically it's just garlic bread with regular wheat bread or white bread. You could use whatever you have on hand. So I just spread that with a little bit of softened butter, and then I'm going to sprinkle on a little bit of parsley, some garlic powder, and some salt. And then I had some Parmesan cheese in the fridge, so I sprinkled that on top. You definitely don't have to do this, but it does make it a little bit more delicious if you have that. So after the penne was done cooking, we stirred it in with the sauce, and it was really good. I would definitely recommend this recipe if you like this kind of thing. Here was the garlic bread. I just cooked that in a 400-degree oven until it toasted up, and that's what we had for dinner along with the salad on this night. So here is the chicken kale pasta with the garlic bread, and then I had a Caesar salad kit that I made on the side as well. Okay, so this next recipe I'm going to share with you is a dessert recipe, and this is for a healthier, lighter peanut butter pie. So I can't say that this was a real favorite in our house. I probably wouldn't make it again, but it was worth trying because I had some graham cracker crumbs that I needed to use up. So I'm just putting those in a dish that I sprayed with cooking spray. I added a little bit of sugar and a little bit of melted butter to those, and I'm just mixing them thoroughly. Alternatively, you could use a pre-made graham cracker crust. That's actually what the original recipe called for. So I'll link that down below. It's from Jen. She has a Weight Watcher YouTube channel, so check her out if you haven't before. But there was the crust. I just went ahead and set that aside while I made the filling. So for the filling, I am using my food processor, and I'm going to use a cup of this powdered peanut butter that I got in one of my Walmart grocery hauls. It was actually a substitution, and that's another reason why I wanted to try this recipe, just because I have so much powdered peanut butter that I need to use up. So I put that in my food processor with some water. You'll also need some almond milk or some oat milk or any other kind of plant-based milk that you want, or you could use regular milk. And then I put some ripe bananas in there as well as some vanilla. And then you just want to process that until everything is really smooth. What we're going to do is pour this mixture on top of the graham cracker and put it in the freezer. And that is how this hardens up. If you don't have a food processor, you could totally use a blender as well. So after that was smooth, I went ahead and poured that over the graham cracker crust. And then I did sprinkle over a little bit of Lily's chocolate chips before I put it in the freezer. This was probably in the freezer for about 3 hours before we had it for dessert. I would say, like, I do think the flavor is good. It's not very sweet. There's really no sugar in it, obviously. If I made it again, I would probably add some Splenda or erythritol, but we topped it with some Reese's whipped cream. So that's it for today's Vlogust video. I will be posting another What's for Dinner this week that has 5 pantry recipes, so make sure you come back for that. I'll see you tomorrow. Bye.